Today I'm out here at Panola Mountain State Park. Panola Mountain is a mountain of rock, essentially. So this is a granite. It's actually not a great grade of granite, and hence the reason why you don't see people out here quarrying it for countertops and for gravel, for roads and stuff, because it's a very poor grade granite. Now this granite is part of a pluton or a laccolith. They're not quite sure exactly which it is. Just so you know, a pluton is a body of magma that separates from a larger body of magma and is isolated by itself, and it hardens under the Earth's surface. So you got the dirt and the trees and everything else on top of it, and it hardens underneath the surface. And then a laccolith is actually part of a batholith, which is a huge body of magma under their surface, and then you get a upstream of magma that's going towards the surface, and then it just stops somewhere. So you have the like stream of magma that connects the batholith, which is the huge body of magma, further down, with the laccolith, which is the smaller body of magma. And the laccolith will actually cool on its own, separate from the batholith, and then you get almost like a pluton, but it's still connected. Pluton or a batholith, a good example of that is Stone Mountain, which is that way, like 10-15 miles. Actually, these are not part of the same system. A lot of people believe that you got Panola Mountain, you've got Arabia Mountain, and Stone Mountain, that they're all part of the same underground magma system. They're not. They are separate, different granites. So if you look out and see that there's boulders, right? You got all these boulders, and you see some of them are breaking apart in what looks like sheets, right? So when you get erosion off of these laccoliths or batholiths or plutons, you're removing weight and you're removing pressure from that rock. And believe it or not, when you remove pressure from rock, it starts to expand like anything else. So when you bring it closer to the actual Earth's surface, you have less weight on it, it starts to expand. That's called isostatic rebound. And then when that expanding, it starts to break apart. And it breaks apart like that. And that breakage is actually called exfoliation. So you know how you exfoliate your skin to clean it? And that's the rock cleaning itself, essentially. So this says that this causes the granite to expand via the process known as exfoliation. The expanding of the granite is called isostatic rebound. The breaking apart is exfoliation. Yay. And then you don't get the same magmas, or you don't get these same rocks from the same magma unless you have fractional crystallization. That's a different story. This is going to be a completely different magma than this, for sure. So you can get gabbro and basalt from the same, but not granite. So Panola Mountain and Stone Mountain are known as it's a weird word. It's a Native American word. It's monadnock, or an Inselberg, which is a German word, both meaning lone mountain or island mountain. So it's basically you got flat land, and then you just have this giant hill sitting there. Everybody sees it and they're like, hey, that's a mountain, and it's by itself. It's an Inselberg. So in 1821, the Native Americans that lived here, the Creek, had to succeed this land to the state of Georgia. And the state of Georgia held a lottery for adult white males to own the land. And this land was given to, that Panola Mountain sits on, and was given to a man named Aaron Parker Sr. And it was actually, the mountain itself was ignored by everyone because it's granite, right? But it's really crappy granite. So you can't sit here and quarry it for anything useful. So nobody cared about it. You can't plant plants on this other than the few trees that grow on it. And you can't farm it at all. So it was largely ignored, and basically it was just handed down from generation to generation after that for about 100 years. So eventually this land was handed down through the generations, and a man named Yarborough got a hold of it. He was actually outside the family. That was the first time that this land had left the Parker family. When Yarborough got a hold of it, he was based out of Atlanta, DeKalb County, I think. And then this became Rockdale County, which was part of Henry County, but it was cut down to Rockdale County. So he came here. He actually made his summer house here. He's the one reason why there's some lakes here, which hopefully we'll see later. He dammed up some of the creeks, made some lakes, thought this was a beautiful piece of property. This was right after World War II. And he liked it so much that the state conservatives, the land conservatives, when they came out here and were like, hey, we'd like this land, he's like, you know what? Good for you. So the year is 1967, and he gave the land over to the state of Georgia as a conservation. All right, so the word Panola itself. It's a weird word, right? You'd imagine it's a Creek word, since this used to be Creek's land. It's not. It's a Choctaw word, and it means cotton, which is actually funny, because when the Choctaw lived in this area, they did for a short time, they actually never technically owned land here, not like the Creek, but they never grew cotton. The Creek never grew cotton. But for whatever reason, we got the Panola River, and you've got Panola Mountain. Whoever called it that, we don't know. It just, the name was called that, and it stuck. And now it's Panola Mountain, even though there's no cotton grown here at all. The best things about hiking in the wilderness is finding food. So this area used to, aside from obviously the mountains, it used to be all farmland. So if you look around, that's why all the trees are so small. Because all of this used to be cleared out up until 1929, and then it became used for like bootleggers and stuff.
Bootleggers?
Yeah, they used to have a bunch of sills through here because nobody would come out here ever, because it's far enough away from Atlanta at the time that nobody cared. So they would come out here, set up stills, and produce moonshine. So before the Yarborough Farms was sold to the state of Georgia in 1967, we go back to World War II, when Yarborough himself would go around and dam up all the creeks that you see. Well, that we've crossed that you didn't see, because I didn't film it because it's a creek, even though I love streams. But that's aside from the point. Anyways, you can see behind me, this is Alexander Lake. Why it's called Alexander Lake, I don't really know. I can't seem to find any information about it, other than I know this is one of the lakes that Yarborough created by damming up the creeks and the underground water table and stuff like that. Because there'll be certain parts when you're walking around, especially here in North Georgia and in Panola State Park, where you'll just see water just appearing out of the ground. And that's just where the water table is higher than the ground level. So it just keeps going. Like, water wants to stay flat, so it's going to keep staying flat if it can. It looks like a coronavirus.
Well, one of them came from nature.
This is usually strange. Well, not usually. Not too actively stream, but it's still damp. So the water table must be pretty high right here. Because it usually comes down and it probably disappears somewhere up in there, because that's not as damp, but then you get really damp right here. And since it's sand and it hasn't rained in a couple days, the water table is really high. That's a big tree, that one down. Bigger flake. I noticed one of the things when you walk around here is, even though they cleared out a lot of the trees, they left a lot of the big pine trees, like the really tall ones. So like all the really tall pine trees you see are like at least 100 or so years old. And those were left for whatever reason originally when they took out all the other trees.
Maybe they're just lazy.
Probably.
They're like, I like Christmas.
Like, you know what? This is going to be a Christmas tree in 1922. So if you see behind me this tree, it's directly behind me, right up there. You see that big like knot forming on the side of the tree? Huge, can't miss it. That's known as a burl. And so burl is actually a knot that forms on a tree, like where a branch grew, or like it was like a bud that was going to grow there, but then it died. And so the tree actually grows over it. And then that gets infected with a fungus or a bacteria of some sort. And then as the continuous infection keeps going, the tree keeps growing over it, and you get a big formation like that. Now, you would think that because the tree keeps growing over and it's strengthening that spot, it's not. It's actually weakening it because the bacteria or fungus is still eating away at the tree. So when you get a big windstorm or a rainstorm or something comes through, usually blow over trees like this. Now, it may be a little bit hard to understand, but think of it as an ingrown nail. Not an ingrown toe, because that'd be weird, but an ingrown toenail, right? You leave it alone, it gets worse. It gets infected. Skin builds up on it, right? And then it gets infected, and then it just keeps getting worse, and it hurts. And if you let it go long enough, you have to get your toe amputated, right? It makes you weaker, even though you have a lot more skin building up on it. Same thing as a burl. The tree ingrown toenail. So I have right behind me is the Aaron Parker Jr. house. So as I don't remember if I mentioned earlier, but Aaron Parker Sr. was the man who won this property in the lottery after the Creek Indians succeeded the land to Georgia. Well, his son was the first person to actually build a house on this land. Now, this used to be Henry County, and in 1870, this became Rockdale County because they divided up Henry County because it was so large, and it was the western frontier, wasn't built up yet, so this became Rockdale County. And as of today, this is actually one of the oldest houses in Rockdale County. So side note, the Alexander Lake over there, and I said I didn't know what the name was, well, I came across something as I was walking, and it's actually the Alexander family donated a bunch of land to the state of Georgia in 2002, so they named the lake after them. And actually, the Alexander family owned most of this area, like including the house that we just saw, after the Parker family sold the land that they owned to, and the Yarboroughs. Yarborough married into the Parker family, yay. But after they sold the land to the state of Georgia, the Alexanders still own this part, and they sold it to the state of Georgia in 2002.